Welcome to an exciting edition of Founding Philly, where we assemble local startup founders at the Fiddler Club to hear their entrepreneurship journeys. Gain deep insights and inspiration from this roundtable discussion with Ted Mann from Collex, Mike Crossey from Cozen O'Connor, Joe Biancaniello from J.P. and Mike Petrakis from Batch. All right, well, thank you guys for joining the Founding Philly Roundtable Series. Welcome. We are here at the Fiddler Club at the back bar. We were just talking about this. The podcast has done 50 episodes now and have really been looking for what's next, what's that next kind of series look like. So this is that Roundtable Series. So again, thank you guys for joining. We're gonna get into your startup journeys, what it's like building in Philly. We'll get into some of the new exciting things that you're working on. And what I'm most excited about this episode is obviously we have founders to talk about their experiences, but also from Joe and Mike, you guys just kind of being these ecosystem supporters locally and kind of what that advice looks like for some founders. So excited to be here. With J.P. Morgan's guidance, your startup can go from growing pains to growing without limits. With tech that powers your growth and bankers across the globe to help you disrupt every market, you can go from seed to IPO and beyond. J.P. Morgan, let's build your future together. Cozen O'Connor's nationally recognized emerging business and venture capital team partners with entrepreneurs, investors, and growth companies at every stage. With more than 925 attorneys across 33 offices, Cozen has the experience and resources needed to help businesses scale, raise capital, and excel in today's dynamic markets. As one of the nation's top law firms, Cozen O'Connor is uniquely positioned to support your team's success. To kick things off, just want to do some intros so the audience get a better idea about you guys. So Ted, mind doing a quick intro before we jump in?
Sure, Ted Mann. I've run 4 technology companies. My most recent current one is called Collex. It's an app for trading cards.
Awesome.
Mike Crossey. I guess I'm the first. I think the only one that's the first time on the show. So,
yeah, that's true.
So thank you for having me. I am the co-chair of Cozen O'Connor's Emerging Business and Venture Capital Group. Been working in the startup space in Philly for the last 20 years, and gotten to dabble in a few other startups as well. This was sort of one of ours, and get to work with entrepreneurs like Ted. So it's been great.
No, excited to have you on. Joe?
Thanks, Zach. I believe it's my 4th time on the podcast, so thrilled to be back in this format. Joe Biancaniello. I am an executive director in J.P. Morgan's Innovation Economy Banking team, specifically focused on technology companies, and as a Philadelphian, I cover the state of Pennsylvania for the practice.
Mike Petrakis, I'm the founder and CEO of Batch. Batch is an app to help people plan parties with their friends and book fun experiences. We're actually going to be launching accommodations, bars, and restaurants soon too. But we are live in 35 markets across the US, but love to be here at our home base of Philly, and good to see you guys.
Thank you guys. I do just want to give Mike a shout out. The idea of this Roundtable Series came probably 2 years ago. Mike invited me to the Fiddler Club to have drinks with some guys. Literally right here.
Yeah.
And I was sitting here, we were getting into the weeds of things and experiences and journeys, and I was like, this would be awesome if I just recorded this. So that's the goal today, is to really just have this candid conversation about the journey, challenges, things that are top of mind that you're seeing today in the market, and just creating a great conversation for the local ecosystem to hear. Let's just kind of get more into the backgrounds and what you guys do. So you talked about Collex, your experiences building multiple companies. Yeah. Just to give people a kind of a better understanding about your background in kind of the AI recognition space and how that kind of led you into Collex, and now how you're kind of approaching kind of trading cards differently.
Sure, yeah. I guess computer vision AI has become my favorite little magic trick, gimmick, you might say. So I started my career as an entrepreneur. My first startup was a mobile coupon app business called SnipSnap. It was born out of a very real problem for me at the time, which was I am a terrible couponer. I never remember to bring coupons to the store. At the time, had little kids, was buying a lot of strollers and diapers, and kind of got reamed out by my wife, not more than once, for forgetting the Bye Bye Baby coupon. And so basically wanted a way to get my wife off my back. So what I started doing is this is, I think, how many startups have happened. I need to get somebody off my back. Yeah. So my hack to solve this problem was I would just photograph all the coupons that would get in the mail, right? So rather than sitting in a drawer in like the bowl of shame, I would just photograph them and toss them in the trash. And then when I'd go to the store, hopefully I remembered, but I would like pull out my phone, look up the coupon, scan it. And so before long, I started to realize as I'm doing that, everybody else in line started to do the exact same thing. And sometimes some of them would even say, hey, can I borrow that? Can I borrow your phone? And can I show that? Thought like maybe there's an idea for something here. So, one thing led to another, and tested a bunch of, used other tools to kind of find the shape of the product, but eventually put together a team, built the SnipSnap coupon app, and very quickly became the largest retail coupon app in the country. We had about 6 million users at our after just a few years, and it was.
I didn't know how big that was.
It was quite big. Sorry, I hope that doesn't sound too.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, I think we pounded our fist on that one. Yeah.
I'll give you a sense of like how big it was. So it got to the point where like you would go into like any Target or Dunkin' Donuts, and there was a sign printed saying, "Don't try to redeem your coupons from the SnipSnap app." We actually got backlash because it had gotten so big, and these different like retailers, Target was at the time starting something called Cartwheel, and they were like trying to push people to use their own app for coupons. Yeah. They didn't want this other app, but it had become like that popular, like where everybody was, and we estimate that we saved our users like, billions of dollars. We had, on the app itself, we had, I think at least 500 million coupons saved. So. Wow. It gets, I think it gets even better as we start to talk about like collects, but that was my first experience founding a business, and we actually managed to get to be basically break even and sold after just a couple of years. So we sold very early in the life cycle, which, any entrepreneur will tell you, when you sell that early, you're probably not gonna, it's not the mega exit, it's not the mega money, but if you still own a lot of business, you can actually make out a little bit better. So that was the kind of the calculus I did at the time. After that, I ran 2 SaaS businesses. One was Slice, which was visual product search, where you could take a picture of a product, find it. We licensed that to every major US retailer, from Nordstrom to Macy's to Home Depot. And alongside Slice, we actually had a spin-out business because that same technology worked really well for spare parts, like car parts, and industrial maintenance. So that company, Partium, was also another kind of neat outgrowth. So I consider these all separate startups. My wife thinks it's all bleeds into one.
Why are you so good at consumer just driving consumer virality?
Those two were SaaS businesses.
Yeah, but still, I can't get the 6 million out of my head right now.
Consumer facing, I guess, in a way, but through the retailer apps.
It's also this key theme of this like recognition piece, which is like the core technology that is like the reoccurring theme through all of this now with collects too.
Yeah, and different flavors, right? Like, so in SnipSnap's case, it was like, sorry if it's jargony, but like OCR, optical character recognition. Like we were doing like detection of all the details on the coupon and the barcode and the logo. Slice was very ambitious, like trying to identify a product and match it to something a retailer sells. Partium was even more ambitious, like trying to like identify screws and bolts, like down to the thread count. Collects came about because we were selling Slice at the time. We had a kind of complicated 2-part exit, but a good outcome for Slice. Partium was growing gangbusters in Europe, and I'd done an acquisition to kind of further our growth there, but I didn't want to go move to Europe.
Sure.
So my life is here in Philly. So around that time, I was working on a project with my son, and it was actually my son Charlie who I was like, Dad, could we use that visual search tech you're always talking about? Could we use it to help me look up my trading cards? He was having a problem I had when I was a kid, which was he never knew what his trading cards were worth, and he would do stupid trades and like feel bad about it afterwards that he and so he wanted a little help in figuring out, what the cards were worth. And so we started working on this, what was a little weekend project to help him. And eventually I realized, this is what I want to do next. I can go more into that if you want.
Yeah.
I feel like I've already eaten up too much time.
No.
But that was I exited those businesses and got to go all in on.
Yeah. No. I think that's great context to have to your story, because I think there's this common theme with you guys. It's like, it's not your first time building a company or building a brand or doing this, right? You have lessons learned that now you kind of are applying it. So I want to get into all that, but now looking at you, Mike, too, right? Like, you had experience building brands before this. Now you're at Batch. Not similar story, right? But the idea that you kind of stumbled upon this, trying to figure out a classic problem with your friends, right? So you might just share a little bit more about that, more about your background.
I mean, we've been psychopaths for a long time, just building companies our entire career, right? Yeah. So, I bootstrapped 2 companies prior to Batch. The first was a tennis apparel brand from the 70s that we bought the IP to and relaunched in 2013. I was fresh out of college and just trying to get that brand on anybody that I could. But claim to fame there was, we had a couple fun years of growth. We sold it. It was an irreverent brand with the pot leaf logo, or Japanese maple leaf. We sold it to country clubs across the US, but we also sold it to urban streetwear shops. And at one point, we had sponsored Donald Young, who was like the #1 African-American tennis player in the country, or in the world at that point, and he was in the US Open. It was such a cool experience. I was 24 years old, and I was just like, this is awesome, right? And then basically I did not found that company, and I wanted to found a company, but because I had all the experience, right? I was the first hire at the first one. I started Wolico. I was co-founder and COO of that company, and it's a men's activewear business that was based in New York. We built that company up primarily on e-commerce, so that was first lessons in digital marketing and customer acquisition. And we sold it 80% e-commerce, 20% to like Equinox and a few other retailers. And then I wanted to build a venture-backed, I was just feeling extra crazy and wanted to build something that could be quite large.
Just add a little more pressure.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I had the experience. I got involved and bought a gym at one point, and I was kind of like, all right, I want to take on something a little more risk while I can. I was not married yet, and I was kind of like, this is a window, right? Yep. So looked at the group travel space after going on a surf trip that I was doing all the planning for, and I was like, why? It's so fragmented to find restaurants, where to stay, what to do, all those things, right? And I was the lead planner for basically all my trips, and my friends just depended on it. They were like, yeah, he'll figure it out. It's like, they can't even figure out breakfast when we're on this trip. Yeah. I'm like, come on, man, you drink coffee at home, what's so different, right? So I felt like, we put a product together, invite your friends, put an itinerary together, chat with them, figure out what you want to do, and split up expenses. So planning app, we thought about bachelor and bachelorette parties as an entry point vertical because niche market, mandatory event. If you get invited to it, they're going to bring in all their friends, so you'll have built-in virality to it. Launched the app January 1st, 2020, built a wait list of 50,000 people, let them all in, got to 100,000 people or users in the first 3 months. COVID shut the thing down immediately. Had to raise money, can talk through all that stuff throughout that period. But we learned throughout that time, people were adding all of these events to their itinerary about fun things to do. And that was a super fragmented space because, finding party buses, hibachi chefs, drag shows, these guys aren't really focused on their marketing. They're focused on providing a great customer experience. So I said, let's tell their story, right? So we built 3 different cities, had our heads down for a year building up this marketplace from scratch, and we launched it in 2021, and we've been off to the races ever since.
I think what's so interesting about both your guys' stories and something that we often see with new entrepreneurs that we're working with or we're coming across is that you guys both really were solving a problem for yourself before starting it. And I think there's an interesting question, especially for younger entrepreneurs, if you're coming out of a college or a university, is, can you go to, Wharton or Temple or Drexel and say, I'm going to take a class and I'm going to ideate on some business because I want to start a business, as opposed to, I have a problem. Oh, this could be a business. Do you guys think it's more important to have that as a catalyst, or do you think that businesses can be as successful if you haven't done it? I mean, because Even
I think
like,
identifying the pain point is part of it, but I think, so I mean, I'll give you a case in point. When 12 years ago, I did a Philly startup weekend. Remember those?
yeah.
And one of the things I pitched, I told you this, right? Was Stag Fun. Like
Yes.
It was more of like a Groupon for like bachelor
You were onto
parties.
us. Yeah.
But it was like, I mean, I just knew the pain of like having been through. I haven't been to a bachelor party in a while, but back in that era, like I guess I was going to quite a bit, and it was like an obvious pain. So it's like not that hard to identify the pain point. Probably like a million other people have identified it, but actually coming up with a hopefully an idea for how to solve it, and maybe even like before you start building the thing, like figuring out how to brute force solve it with existing tools. Yeah. That's the real trick. Like, and so like new entrepreneurs, like I feel like so often it's very easy to say like, oh, this causes me a lot of pain. I want to build a business around solving that pain. But if you haven't actually validated that the solution works before you.
I did approach it as an investor POV though, because I did have a couple I had experience under my belt, right? So I think there's a whole debate in the venture community about ideas versus management teams that make things successful. Like great management team, poor idea, poor to moderate outcome. Great idea, okay management team, great outcome. Like you'd be surprised about some of the scenarios that I've seen this work. This is a hot take. But
I have so many friends who are like outstanding entrepreneurs, and if the idea is sort of faulty and the solution is faulty from the get-go, like
that's what I'm saying.
They'll be able to pivot, they'll be able to kind of adjust, but many of those same entrepreneurs that I think the world of ultimately end up having to scrap it and like kind of like.
So that's a little bit of a counter, isn't it? Almost on like, because the idea so often
it's against ourselves. We think we're great entrepreneurs, but I'll tell you what, Klex is a great idea.
Well, in the line, it really is. I mean, as I'm a believer as an angel investor too. I think it's amazing what Ted has built. But I feel like so often you hear in the investment community is bet the jockey, and
I think that's. Well, I think people are pumping tires.
Well, so go into it more though. So what does that actually mean though? It's that if you can like build a good business model and actually run a good business, that could have a better success versus like I have a good idea.
I think there's validity to what investors look at investing in when they try to look at a pre-seed or seed deal. I think there is truth in market size, customer acquisition costs, unit economics. And all of those normal boxes that you hear over and over again when we pitch are real. Like that is real. You need to have all of those things checked.
Yeah, no, you have to be able to adapt and be nimble. And probably, any good idea, there's 3 other people that have that exact same idea and are launching the exact same thing at more or less the same time. Mm-hmm. And you have to, hopefully have a plan for how you're going to outmaneuver them or why yours is going to be different. I mean, when we launched Klex, there were literally 3. Like there had not yet existed an app for scanning sports cards, and there were 3 apps that launched all within a span of a few months. Mm-hmm. And we had to, I think, have a better product strategy and vision to be able to kind of like emerge as the winner there.
I'm just saying at step 0, idea is important. Once you get going, obviously it's all execution. Sure. Like there's a huge graveyard of group travel planning apps.
I was just going to say, from a banker standpoint, someone who works in finance and the capital markets, although not an investor, I advise both companies and investors. And the other way to say this is sort of there's product risk, there's execution risk, and there's market risk, right? And execution is sort of more on the founders and management team side, right? Mm-hmm. And the entire team. And product risk is that idea, right? And how viable is that product? And so one thing we talk about a lot is you don't want to be a hammer looking for a nail. You want to go out and find the nail to hammer, right? And I'll say it another way. You have a great idea, but is it, maybe you're the customer in the sense that when you first started SnipStat, or essentially you and your friends were the first customers that you had in mind when you had the ideation for Batch, right? So it's either you go out and talk to the customers, or you are the customer and then you verify and validate that by talking to other customers. That's the nail you need to hammer, right? And so sometimes you'll find, especially in the hard tech, deep tech space, which I don't expect to get into today, but is where I spend a lot of time. engineers, just to draw a corollary and a comparison, they create these really, really cool products, but there's no market for it. It's just a cool, really cool product. Like something that's incredible engineering, incredible science involved with creating some sort of robot or some sort of Internet of Things device, but what's the TAM? And when you actually think about, and that's why TAM is so important.
That's what I'm saying.
Because is there really is the TAM addressable, or excuse me, is the TAM actually verifiable, right? And so I think from my standpoint, I think about this stuff a lot too, and it's interesting to hear your guys' perspective on what that process was like.
Yeah, and I think taking it to the next point, which is the way you did a amazing job of bringing your company to market and figuring out how to monetize it, scale it, get through the next stages, get through the venture funding. And then we were talking about the other day, just like how to monetize this thing leading into the marketplace. And that's where execution and management and all those things come in after step zero. After you identified problem, built product for it, and then you figured it out, how to grow it.
Yeah.
And it feels like that's a problem that can oftentimes be solved too, right? I mean, so like that's what you're really saying at inception, at step zero, it's about the idea, it's about the product, it's about is there a market. Once you get beyond that, and you prove product, now it's execution and management. And I had a partner that used to say, and this is, by the way, a credit to both of you guys too, as CEOs, that, the half-life of a venture-backed CEO is 2 years, and he meant, within 2 years of venture funding, half of you are going to be gone, and within the next 2 years, the rest of you are. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really interesting, and that's not always the case. I mean, you have the Facebook, the Zuckerberg stories where CEOs really run it. But I think oftentimes, I was having this conversation actually in the CPG context of another local company that had launched and had a great product market fit, but the founding team just couldn't get the economics, the unit economics, the velocities, those sort of things they needed to. They came in, put another team in place, and now it's a company that's on a several $100 million revenue run rate, but it was sort of product first, team second.
One of Mike's first startups, right, that you were involved with is Venmo.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, I think people think about
What's
Venmo
Venmo?
as this ubiquitous thing, but that took a long time.
It took a really long time.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so, it was really interesting. And I'll say, my journey was a little different than these guys. I mean, I wasn't as smart in the beginning, and frankly, I don't know that I had the chops to get into the entrepreneurial side, but I always loved entrepreneurship. I mean, for me, it was when I was 13, and I still remember this, true story. We were in a social studies, or economics class, and and this, I promise this does lead to Venmo. This is also my ADHD going all over the place. But, I was watching a video in whatever it was, social studies or economics or something like that, and they did an overview of Molly's Trolleys and Famous Amos cookies. And I'm watching that, and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. And it's probably just because I didn't want to study or get good grades or anything else like that. But so ever since then, I was always very fascinated in it. I studied business. I went to law school. I started out in very big law, so, doing all billion-dollar transactions, and I hated it because, it was just so, they'd throw you in a conference room with, 10,000 documents and say, read them. And I'm like, well, this isn't really building a company. So I almost left the law. I got a chance to come work for, I don't know if anybody in the room knows, I'll still give a shout out to him since we're on the Founding Philly podcast. The original kind of godfather of entrepreneurship in Philly was named Steve Goodman. Steve was an absolutely phenomenal man. I met him, fell in love with him, got a chance to work with him. And I realized his magic was...
This is at Morgan Lewis.
This is at Morgan Lewis, yeah. Yeah, Steve was, Steve was a brilliant guy. He was the first person from UPenn to ever clerk for the U.S. Supreme Court. And what was so fascinating about this, and I'm really probably going down an ADHD rabbit hole, but
it's okay.
What was so fascinating about him, I think he was a founder at heart too. And when you come off of something like the Supreme Court as an attorney, he could have done whatever he wanted to do, work at the most prestigious firms. And he said, no, I don't want to do any of that. I want to start my own firm and work with entrepreneurs. And this was in the 1960s. Like, nobody did this at that point. The big firms weren't a thing. And he built an amazing practice. So I fell in love with him. I had the fortunate opportunity to go and learn from him some. But I realized what made his magic was, he had a chance to build something outside of a big law firm. So I got a chance, as Ted mentioned, I was representing a company called Ticket Leap at the time, which is another great Philly company. Should have beat Eventbrite, but I just think we didn't raise quite enough money there. We raised $12 million when they raised $50 million. But the CTO for Ticket Leap was Ikram Ismail, and Ikram and Andrew Cortina were the two main founders of Venmo, and we all got together, and Chris had said, hey, Mike, I know you're thinking about leaving Morgan Lewis and doing something, you should hop on and help these guys because they're going to go to jail. They're trying to run an unlicensed bank. And I was like, I was like, all right, cool. I'll give it a shot. What I can do, So this is literally over drinks. So I always like to say, like, it was their idea. You know what I mean? Like, they had kind of built the prototype for the app. I just wanted that experience.
Sure.
And it really was. It was to Ted's point, I think, kind of coming full circle. It was a very long, and kind of circuitous journey. A lot of people actually say, well, we were involved in the early team. You guys should be retired and doing everything else. And I was like, look, it was a long and kind of challenging process. We started out, we had no money. We tried to figure out how do we get a few restaurants using it, right? I mean, like, try to figure out how do you build in early product virality, right? So we had the idea of, I pay you and you can automatically post it to Facebook and tell all your friends you just got something from Venmo. My wife
that still does not make sense to me in the Venmo product. Like, I still don't understand why there needs to be an activity feed. But
there was a lot of discussions on how the activity feed came about. My wife actually got one of the earliest and first Venmos and still was like, you guys are such losers. This is never going to work. And I'm like, maybe. But, it took us a couple of years we raised $300,000 at first, and that was pulling teeth. It was actually tough, when you think about the Philly ecosystem, too.
Yeah.
This was not a Philly-centric company.
What year was this, Mike?
This was 2008, 2009.
And then, so why didn't Venmo stay in Philly?
So,
I think
this trend
listening.
has changed, but I mean, I will say there was pressure from Excel. So Excel Partners led our Series A. Yeah. And Excel was a West Coast fund, but they had a good New York office, and there was push for that. Andrew Cortina also, he lived in New York. He was from New York, so I think there was the typical reasons that you'd see. Well, our investors are there. We needed to raise capital, and we need the talent there. I do believe that narrative has truly changed. I actually believe we probably could have stayed in Philly. But I will say that, the reception from investors wasn't the same. And if there is something, and you guys might have an opinion on this, that, people have always said, Philly needs is we need more capital. We need, and I would actually say it's just risk capital. So I think, like, if you go out west, you'll find a lot more investors. And now it might be in Austin, and I think you're seeing this in New York, but you'll see a lot more investors that'll say, oh, I get it. What if everybody scanned their cards with Collects? Wow, that could be huge. Whereas on the East Coast, historically, I think what we saw was, well, show me the unit economics and show me the business model. And it was funny. So, like, actually, when we got our Series A term sheet at Venmo, and I don't know what your experience was, but I know what Collects' experience, have been with working through them. Like, when we got our Venmo one, it was a one-page term sheet. In fact, sometimes when I speak at, like, a university or something, we'll pull this term sheet up as an example of, like, what entrepreneurs could go through. Our Venmo Series A term sheet was one page, and it said, Series A preferred stock, standard terms, right? Nothing else. And when we negotiated it, we closed it very fast, and nobody negotiated it. We didn't haggle around the edges. Everything was billion or bust, right? It was, we're not trying to engage in downside protection. And I think that was, that was a big difference. And so, like, when you looked at Venmo, they said, well, there's more engineers in.
Was it only Excel in the Series A?
No, we had other parties, but they were our biggest lead that, most people would know about. Right. Most of our angels followed us around, and, we had some of the early Black Eyed Peas were involved, and, so. Yeah. But he was, so it was interesting getting there. And then we sold early too, right? I think that's super the thing. Early. Like, everybody's like, oh, Venmo was $1 billion exit. It was like, I think the maybe not.
You sold to Braintree, which then in turn sold to PayPal.
Yeah. So, that was, talk about, think about when do you hold on? But it was really, for Venmo to get to scale, it was so much more complicated than I think people would really envision in terms of having the payment rails in place and having these sort of things set up. So, we needed, $1 billion back-end payment processor like a Braintree to really make that scale, right? And then once you had the PayPal network and once PayPal was acquired, Venmo really took off. But that was, it was, and that was a fast journey. That was still well over a 10-year journey.
Yeah. These things are 10-year journeys. So that's back to the point of, like, why I have the hot take, which is, like, idea first at stage 0, is because you're going to be spending a long time on this.
Yeah.
Right? So you want to make sure you feel really good about the opportunity that you're pursuing and you're willing to do it for a long time.
Yeah, 100%.
One of the things, like, the personal kind of life goal for the Philly market is to figure out how do we keep more of the successful founders kind of invested in this market. Because I think, people sometimes like don't realize how many, mega exits we've had, right? Like in this region. But the kind of like the talent pool and the, capital leaks out and doesn't get reinvested. I think it's I don't want to like point any fingers or like say that it's like a huge, any one person, but I mean, like when you try to think, like, help me with some of the big exits, right? Like GSI Commerce, Spark Therapeutics, La Colombe, you could just go like across all sectors, right? And there have been some like mega success stories, but one of the challenges when you talk about like raising capital here, like people willing to take billion-dollar bets, there's just not a lot of that.
Yeah.
But those folks that were behind those companies should be willing to do that. They should be willing to make those bets, and they also, should have, or no, in most cases I know did incubate like the talent to be able to kind of keep it going, right? I think there's some really good example. You mentioned Bob Moore, like Bob's done, like the RJ Metrics Mafia is a thing. It's like not quite the PayPal Mafia, but getting there, right? And like Jake Stein and like what he's gone on to do with Common Paper and Bob himself with Crossbeam. I mean, like there's really cool stuff happening there, and we just need to figure out how to do more of that, right? Yeah. And whatever comes a batch and collects and all, like we need to figure out how to keep this talent here, how to keep investing in this market, which by the way, like super props to Mike for not only being a founder, but also like, building a venture fund,
Put my money where my mouth is.
Yeah, exactly. Looking at this market specifically.
If you are scaling a business, building a team, or just looking to surround yourself with people who get it, you should know about Fiddler Club. It's where Philly's founders, investors, creatives, and leaders come together in a space as ambitious as they are. With workspace, wellness, dining, and curated events all under one roof, Fiddler Club is your invitation to connect, grow, and belong. Step into your ultimate third space, where connections spark and ideas thrive. Visit fiddlerclub.com to learn more. So Mike, I want to get your thoughts because you are from the area, but spent time in New York. And that's how we got connected when you moved back during COVID. Be like, hey, I see what you're doing, let's talk. So when you think about that, just being in New York, building those past brands, but now kind of coming back, and I know Batch is remote, but for the most part, right?
They're here twice a month.
Oh.
So the team is flying in right now. We're building.
Philly based, okay.
Yes, we're working on it.
So what has that experience been like, kind of coming back to Philly and building Batch and kind of seeing what is really going on with Philly?
There are a lot of people that want to help. I think that people blame it's a marketplace. People blame two sides, supply and demand, right? Not enough ideas, not enough capital. I think there's a lot of people that want to push this forward. Right. And I think it's about uniting everybody, like to your point. There are a lot of OG people. I've had the opportunity to meet many of them over the past year. So I think it's a matter of just getting everybody together and on the same page and talking about the right things too. Sure. Like, I don't like if people are just doing it for their own interests. Right. Like, frankly, a good starting point, back to idea generation, Philly is a relatively affordable city to live, and you don't need to build a venture-funded business to be an entrepreneur. Sure. Gyms, coffee shops, any retail thing, like lots of businesses can help prop up the city and make it great, right? And you can build franchises, all sorts of things, right? So I don't think entrepreneurship has to mean venture-backed companies. That being said, I do think there will be, we can act as the next generation pending how big we can make our companies. But I think that, it is my personal mission to help build up the Philadelphia venture ecosystem specifically, and contribute wherever I can.
Honestly, I felt like I've been sort of on that same journey, and I think it's been really interesting to watch it evolve. I mean, when I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, I came here to work at Morgan Lewis originally, and I think when I was here, there was an ecosystem for entrepreneurship, but it was smaller. So actually, when I was at Morgan Lewis, I actually incorporated Philly Startup Leaders, which was, really our first kind of grassroots organization. Before that you had, PACT, Philadelphia Alliance for Capital and Technology has been around forever, but that was really for more established companies. So I think it was, when PSL came together, it was this saying, how do we create an organization to pull people together? I also think that, in the 2010s, you started to get a lot more traction with the idea that, you could be successful in building a company, here, that there really was the resources and there was the capital, was just getting that message out. I think COVID actually might have helped it did, in my opinion, it did a couple of things, right? It disbanded some of the organizations. So Philly startup leaders stopped having the events that they were having and stopped bringing some people together like that. And, and I think other really good entrepreneurs, actually I've had this conversation with a number of them, moved out of the area, right? And got a beach house and realized they could work from home and, or work from the beach and come back in. So we've seen that, but I also think it showed us that, we can get remote talent, we can do these sort of things. So it allows people to choose the city they want to be in a little bit more. So I think if we can continue telling that story, regalvanize the next generation, we do have better assets in place. Because if you look at how big Philly Startup Leaders is now, just as one sort of touch point compared to what it was 10, 15 years ago, there's a lot of people that are trying to put some structure around this. I do think we've had more successful exits, all the ones we've talked about, I don't know if you guys know, like the Max Konevskys and Pinnacle 21s of the year, that, that was, a $300 million exit that, what I mean?
Ghost Robotics, I interrupt you, but Ghost Robotics just had a huge exit. It wasn't publicized.
Ghost Robotics?
Yeah. Huge, incredibly
I heard about
lucrative exit for a company that was largely bootstrapped. They raised some seed money early on, and then over 7-8 years, bootstrapped.
They must have raised something from Ben Franklin, because I think I heard about it from them,
Right.
But yeah, I think the infrastructure, much of which you had a hand in creating, and was really quite vibrant pre-COVID. Kind of, unfortunately, a lot of it withered during COVID.
Yeah.
But the PSLs, the co-working spaces, the one we're in right now, the Fitler Club. There is a lot of that. I still think a big part of the challenge comes back to the on the investor side. Because a lot of the institutional investor groups,
they can invest anywhere in the world.
Ben Franklin, actually, who I just invoked, would be one of the exceptions. Ben Franklin actually is willing to take bold bets, and they are willing to kind of they make a lot of investments. But there are a number of great investors, and I know them all very well in this region. But getting them to both buy into Philly companies and also getting people to work there that have had that direct operational experience with a company that's been successful. And again, there's plenty in this region that are good precedent, right? Mm-hmm. That is still, I think, a little bit of a challenge. I'd love to see, more funds getting created from successful veteran entrepreneurs who've exited, as well as the funds that do exist, trying to recruit from that talent pool locally.
Yeah. I always said if I could start a fund, I would want to actually have one early stage one, and I have the name for it now, Reckless Capital. Because I want to be like the 500 startups of Philly. It's just look, your first $50,000 check, we'll give it to everybody, right? Which is really 500 startups. Now, if you want 500 grand, that you got to show me a little bit of traction. But if you pass simpler milestones, we're going to make it and something that would get a little bit more of a splash. Oh wow, you're building a company at a local university. We can get you capital quickly. You know what I mean? And it's that's always been my dream to put that in place. But I agree.
It exists a little. You have some folks like Gabe Weinberg's a good example of somebody who's made a lot of bets.
Little bets.
I don't know. I think there should be folks should be whatever. Honestly, whatever Gabe's doing, pile on that. He's got a pretty good track record.
I mean, here's the thing. I think we're an example. You're here, and we can, I can be. And again, investing is 1% of the time that I spend. 100% of the time is spent on Batch, and we're very limited with our ability to invest. But we do, and the thing is, we can be most helpful or strategic if you are here in person. Right?
Yeah.
That is, we are an interesting case where we have benefited from both of our businesses by just knocking ideas off of each other and seeing what's going on in the board meetings, right? So I think that is the number one reason why we can make a case to invest in Philadelphia companies, we are here. And if we can be helpful, that is how we're going to be most helpful, in person, getting shit done together.
So let's talk about that more. So you're an investor in Collects. We were talking during our prep just around, I mean, you just said, right, how you were bouncing ideas off each other. So go more into that and kind of share behind the scenes of that. Like, what does that really look like, a founder being invested in one of the companies, being on the board, being able to talk through some tactical things about building your marketplaces, things like that. What's that experience like?
We're only 12 to 18 months ahead as a company of TED. So it has actually been, it's actually perfectly relevant, like they're both marketplace companies. I can see his traction, and I see things that are like even better green shoots than what we had in terms of driving virality, right? So, and I mean, let's talk about your seed stage and the decisions that we made about subscription revenue. But
well, yeah, I mean, it was not that long after Mike's kind of invested in 2 rounds, and after the first round, we just got together and started talking about growth marketing, what's working, what's not, and Mike saw some of our numbers on a subscription tier that we had, which was still relatively nascent at the time, and his recommendation was, as we started to see sort of our marketplace, which was we always assumed kind of going to be our main revenue piece, that it was growing but going to take a long time to mature. And Mike saw the subscription revenue. He's like, you need to lean in on this and just focus your energy on, putting that in front of users early and often. And we did.
Because your product was so sticky,
right?
Like you could make this work because you had such a strong product market fit. Right. Like your signals, your engagement metrics, everything was speaking to, you can do a feature like this and scale it.
Yeah, so I mean, again, our app is totally free, but this pro tier offers kind of power user features, like the ability to export your collection, bulk price your cards, all that stuff.
Right.
So we did that, and voila, fast forward to Series A, and 85% of our revenue is coming from subscriptions. And that's how we're making most of our money right now. Doesn't mean that we aren't still very much like a marketplace business or envisioning that as the sort of like the big picture, but also acknowledging it's going to take quite a bit of scale for the economics there to work. So in the meantime, we got to still pay the bills and find a way to ultimately be cash flow positive. So subscriptions has been a big part of that. And then Mike was the one that gave that advice, and then I think turned around and realized oh, this might work for my business too.
For sure, yeah. And that's the thing where that's my point of being here in Philly, having a relationship with Ted. It's not just an asset manager. I have investors that are not involved at all in Batch, and then I have investors that have largely made Batch. They've pulled in capital, they provide amazing introductions. I love them, and I think my whole point is, if we can be helpful, and if we only have one opportunity, like in this case, it's Collects, if I have 10 hours a year kind of thing, he's getting it because I can actually be helpful because there's so much overlap between the two businesses, to the point where, he scales his subscription revenue, and I'm like, subscription revenue is great. Go out to market, command a high multiple from it, and I'm like, okay, wait a second. We found at Batch that we were driving we drive a lot of booking volume to our partners directly on our site, but we were also driving a lot of traffic directly to their site as well. And we felt like we are billboarding for these companies. And we said, well, wait a second, why are we just making money off of a commission basis to our own site if we are truly acting as their billboard, their online marketing presence? And we developed a fee model that has largely enabled us to scale, to open up the business. And since then, we've gone from 25 FTE to basically 50 in the past 6 months as a result of this change. Yeah, and it stemmed from sitting in his board meeting and being like, wait a second, this is very interesting.
So when you introduce a new fee model like that, is there you slowly roll it out, you test it with a couple people, you see if they like it, or is it hey, in 2 weeks from now?
Talk about psycho movement. So we flew our sales team to Philly in the Fiddler Club. We spent an entire week just in a boardroom making calls all week, calling every single partner in our marketplace and said, if you invest in us, we're going to make this work for you. And we're going to be able to spend more money on marketing. We're going to double our marketing budget. You've never had any sort of customer support with us. You'll have all sorts of support. We're going to hire 6 people to run account management and be like hands-on with you to act as business consultants. And we're going to build all these features so you can have more insights to your business. Because what we found was a lot of these companies, they're party boats, party buses. They don't look at Google Analytics or anything, right? And they're just like, yeah, marketing, like influencer marketing. Hell, yeah, that makes sense. And it's like, we can do all of this for like, very nominal fees, right? And you can just pull in us as a resource to execute and drive your traffic and your marketing efforts for you. So the argument made a bunch of sense, but that week was a crazy one because we called up 1,700 partners between 8 of us.
That's a lot.
And it was one of the most rewarding professional weeks of my life, but I think everybody was exhausted. Sure. It was 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.
So we talked product, we talked the entrepreneur journey, building in Philly, but I think it'd be great to just get everyone's perspective on just the fundraising venture outlook going forward.
I kind of just shrug.
I hate to say
it's like build our business.
Exactly. It's like I have like next to nothing to say about the macroeconomic trends. I agree with what they said. I don't disagree with any of that. Like it was last couple of years of challenging fundraising environment. So nevertheless, I was starting a company, venture backed, had to raise money, figured out a way to get it done. Right. And it's like, you can't as a founder, like you can never time the fundraising, right? Like as much as you'd like to say, oh, I'm going to kind of thread the needle and do it exactly the right time. You don't, that's like, nobody has that luxury, right? Maybe at some super late stage that I've never seen, but like Series F, like maybe you can like sort of like decide, oh, now's the time I want to get 500 million in the bank. But like, that's never been a thing. I mean, at early stage, you raise when you need to raise. The things that I've learned along the way, like the only advice I would give to other entrepreneurs is just, start socializing the idea as early as possible. Build a network of people, which I've been fortunate to kind of build up over time in this area, where you go have those conversations, before you're writing a single line of code, and just, getting people on board with the vision and with the idea. And hopefully some of those people, when the time comes, they raise their hand to say, I want to put in an angel check. And you build a big enough pool of those people. When the time comes to do an insider round, which we did, you'll have enough of those people on your cap table that it'll help you weather whatever storm comes. So, I mean, that's like, from my point of view, like we raised a $5 million seed in a $10 million Series A in, I guess, a tough climate. We survived till 25. I think it's, to me, it's like, I don't spend much time at all, if any, thinking about the macroeconomic climate. Just, I want to be like laser focused on just trying to like execute on the business.
I like that you said too. I mean, I really like that there's a no excuses approach. So like, okay, it's a bad environment to raise. I think if there was a small takeaway from what we're saying, I mean, I'd say 2 things, right? I think it's a time to be optimistic. You're lucky if you're kind of starting now. If you were in, Ted or Mike's environment, certainly no excuses, figure out a way to get it done. I think, one interesting thought, that I'm not saying this is right, but, if you have the opportunity, even if you don't need to, if you have the opportunity to raise this year, but you're not quite there, I think it's an interesting conversation among founders and boards to say, maybe we do take in capital. And I'll tell you, the one company that really comes to mind for me on this, that I think weathered the COVID storm, amazingly well, was a company we both know, Genie's, out on the West Coast company. Ended up raising, their last round was a Series D, $150 million from, Silver Lake Partners and Bond Capital, which is the growth fund of Sequoia. Had plenty of money in the bank, 24 months of cash probably sitting there, but had an opportunity with a private equity group that had a lot of experience in their space that said, I want to come in. And I think if you did talk to the CEO there, he'd say, like, I don't know that you could have seen it coming. This was in, the end of 2021 that they raised. But, when everything crashed, they were like, we have 7 years of cash in the bank, and it was a little more dilution. So again, it's going to be different. What's right for every company is going to be different. But there are a lot of founders out there that probably say, well, let me maximize my valuation, and that's going to come mid-2026.
That's
would
going to
say-
hit you in the face.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my quick take on this is we are very fortunate to have the investors and board that we do, and we did raise money through the past year and a half that was from insiders, which was incredible, and I think it was at a slight up round, which is even better. The thing I will say is during that period of time to instill confidence to the major investors, we actually built out more infrastructure to our board too, bringing in operators that came from Get Your Guide, the guys that built Get Your Guide, Uber, Meetup, Tinder, and put them on our board. So we insulated ourselves, and that instilled a lot of confidence to get these rounds done. And then moving forward, now since we have this really strong board, we can think about we can afford to be a little more strategic about when we go out to raise capital. The company is growing, right? I don't want to be in a rush to go raise. If we have the opportunity to do so this summer, maybe, but 2026 is even better. I think profitable, growing, startups are a measure of growth and profitability, right? Yeah. So I think we're going to do it when we have afforded ourselves to be a little bit more focused on, timing when it's optimal for us, but it took a lot of work.
Yeah.
One other thing I'll add is I think, there's I want to give more examples, but I mean Amazon, Apple, some of the best, most iconic companies were founded, raised their first capital in terrible markets, right? And it's I don't know the flip of that. I don't know how many awesome companies were born in frothy markets, but I certainly can point to a ton of examples of companies that have crashed and burned, having raised in a frothy market.
At the height of the dot-com bubble.
Well, that actually gives me
or that have never had the ability to exit because they raised so much capital at such a high valuation that that was never even feasible.
At one point, Amazon was down 98% to the height of their stock price during the dot-com bubble. So
So I don't think you shouldn't end the show on this. Now I feel like what I'm hearing a little bit is the companies like Batch and Collects that started and went through these tougher periods and now might come out on the upswing are going to be in a phenomenal place because you started in a tough time. Nobody should start a company in 25 and wait till the next depression.
Well, I think the advice that I'll reiterate is, not trying, speaking of the board or the people that we brought on, that's not my point. I think we brought on great operators. The point is what you said, which is preparing for those sorts of rounds, you insulated yourself by building up your community locally and you were like, okay, we might need money, here's the story. Same thing. So I think the advice for entrepreneurs is just make sure that at all times, basically, you are trying to insulate yourself as much as possible by surrounding yourself with strategic advisors and investors.
If and when you need to raise money, you hopefully do that when the story's solid or the traction is solid or there's a reason to. Not necessarily because the larger market sounds frothy or good.
I completely agree. The last thing I'll say is that if you're an entrepreneur that is making really important, influential decisions for your company based on the macroeconomy and the variables going on, then I don't think you're cut out to be an entrepreneur. I would say.
Right, sure.
I think it is, though, helpful to overlay or overview the market in terms of what's going on, just for listeners, and also there are things to think about, especially as you grow. The Series C, Series D companies that, the product market, the product risk and the execution risk is a little behind them, never completely, but. And so then you have a little bit more of that dexterity to make some of those decisions around when's the best time and timing a little bit.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, well, guys, that was awesome. Thank you all so much for being part of the Founding Philly Roundtable Series. Always loved talking to you guys. The camaraderie was great, and really appreciate you guys being part of this. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Great. That's good.